Welcome to National Parks Traveler, where we explore the national parks and the issues that involve them.
The National Parks Conservation Association is almost as old as the National Park Service. The service, as you probably know, was established in 1916, and NPCA came along 3 years later. This is Kurt Repenchek, your host at the National Parks Traveler. Through the 106-year history of NPCA, there has been only one woman who held the title of President and Chief Executive Officer. That woman is Theresa Pierno, who has worked for the Park Advocacy Group for more than 2 decades and as NPCA's CEO and President for the past 10 years. At the end of this year, Theresa will step down from the organization, but she won't stop advocating for the parks. She is our guest today, and we'll both look back on her tenure with NPCA and the current political climate that is threatening the National Park Service and the national parks. I'll be back in a moment with Theresa.
The Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation is the primary nonprofit fundraising partner for the Blue Ridge Parkway. It is made up of people who have a deep love for this majestic road and want to ensure that its natural beauty and the experiences it offers endure for generations to come. Show your appreciation at brpfoundation.org. Smokey's Life. Full of stunning photography and thought-provoking reads, Smokey's Life Journal is a biannual magazine produced by Smokey's Life, formerly the Great Smoky Mountains Association. Members receive it free of charge each spring and fall, and it is available for purchase in retail stores throughout Great Smoky Mountains National Park and online at smokieslife.org. Washington's National Park Fund is the official philanthropic partner serving Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. WNPF raises funds for scientific research, youth experiences, volunteer programs, and projects that preserve and protect these national parks in Washington state. Learn how you can help at WNPF.org. Acadia National Park is one of the 10 most popular national parks in the United States. It's also one of the smallest and most vulnerable. That's why Friends of Acadia exists. Friends of Acadia is an independent organization of passionate people inspiring those who love this magnificent park to make a real and lasting difference for Acadia. You can make a difference at friendsofacadia.org.
Hi, Kurt Repenchek with The Traveler. For those who regularly follow the National Parks Traveler, you know that in August we'll mark 20 years as the only news organization that is solely focused on covering national parks and protected areas. We do that with no corporate support, without any annoying pop-ups that get in the way of reading articles, and without those pesky videos that start rolling the moment you open a story. We are able to bring you news, information, features, and yes, opinion columns on the parks every day of the year thanks to readers and listeners who are passionate about the parks and who want to know how they are being managed. I'm pleased to share with you that we have received some grants to produce articles from the parks revolving around threatened and endangered species, from the honey creepers at Haleakala National Park in Hawaii to the staghorn and elkhorn corals at Biscayne National Park in Florida. One of those grants is a $15,000 matching grant. Your support can help us turn that $15,000 into $30,000 and be able to generate many more articles on these topics. As The Traveler is an IRS-approved nonprofit news organization, your contribution more than likely is tax-deductible. Please, if you're passionate about the parks, if you want to know more about the natural resources and the wildlife they protect, make a donation to help us turn that $15,000 into $30,000.
Support from readers and listeners like you make the National Parks Traveler possible every day of the year. If you enjoy the Traveler's content, please consider a donation at nationalparkstraveler.org.
Welcome to The Traveler, Theresa.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Kurt. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to reconnect. It's been a while since we've had you on the show, and it's your retirement party, so to speak. You're going to retire at the end of the year, and so we're going to have to do more of these over the next 6 months.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, it must be hard to retire at this point in time in U.S. history. The parks and the National Park Service seem to need as much support as possible, and yet at the same time, there is so much work to be done. It is so exhausting. I mean, I can fully understand why you'd want to take a break from that.
Well, it's funny, retire is a funny word that nobody uses anymore, right? Because we just kind of go on to something and we continue to fill our space. So as a lifelong advocate and lover of national parks, I will continue to be out there advocating for them. But, you kind of finally reach a point where you say, the organization just completed a $300 million campaign, successful campaign. We are entering into our new strategic plan for the next 5 years. And I'm at a place that I think the organization is really ready and stronger. I mean, it sounds kind of maybe odd because you think, wow, there's all this going on. But, what we do best is, right, we fight to protect the national parks. And I think you can see it in everything that we're doing these many months. And you work with many on our team, and it's an incredible staff that runs NPCA. It's not just me. And
Sure.
and I have an amazing number two, Robin Martin McKenna, who's my chief operating officer, who's been with us almost 25 years. And so she is a great leader in her own right. And then people like Kristen Bringle and our amazing executive team, as well as leaders all over the country. So one thing I've spent my tenure doing is helping develop and bring on some real talent. They've stayed with us for many years. Many of them are here 10 years, 15 years. And so I feel like this will be about as smooth a transition as you can get because, the organization's culture is strong. So, when I think about it, yes, the politics are really rough and what's happening to parks is painful for all of us. But we're fighting. We're fighting back and we're going to win. We're going to win this battle in the end. And we may have a lot of cleanup work to do with our friends at the Park Service and many others, but I'm hopeful that the future for the parks is going to continue to look bright. But these are certainly dark days, for sure.
Well, I applaud your optimism because it seems that every day something new comes up. I've been a professional journalist for, 40 some years and closely followed the Park Service for the past 20 years. And I can never remember a time like this. There is so much going on that needs to be reported upon, and yet Park Service personnel are afraid to talk to media. What comes out of the Park Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. is heavily filtered by the Interior Department. And it's just an unbelievable time because the national parks, is, better than I do, are held in trust for the American people by Congress. They're not held in trust for any individual to influence them with their whims.
No, absolutely. Our national parks are the best example of our democracy, right? I mean, if you think about, here we are, a country that protected our treasures. We protected all of these amazing places, and we hold our stories and our history in high value and really trust our wonderful people at the National Park Service to tell these stories, the historians and the interpretation and all of the work, and protect these places as they have for over 100 years. So, this is an institution that is beloved by the American people. And we're seeing institutions like our national parks be attacked. And it's a very frightening time. As you said, people are afraid to speak out. But it's been wonderful to see our retirees and many of our former Park Service really engage in a powerful way, as well as Park Service staff are doing everything they can every day to make sure that they do the best they can to keep the parks, safe and open and doing their job. But we really need Congress to step up and step in and do their job.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting. We've been doing the podcast since February of 2019. And from time to time over those past 6 years, people say, well, stay out of politics. We don't want to hear about politics. But unfortunately, politics are part of our life and part of how the parks are managed. And if you don't understand the politics behind some of the decisions being made, there could be decisions made that you totally disagree with, like the whitewashing of history.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's we here too, because we are a nonpartisan organization and we work really hard to maintain that. And we are careful when we think about how we approach subjects because we don't want to alienate people. We want to bring people together. We think parks, right, are that place that people have been able to come together. It's you see equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats and independents saying how much they treasure them, how much they care, and they have memories, childhood memories, right? This is an important part of their life. And so when I talk to people about what's happening now, it's not about the Democrat, the Republican, and it's about protecting these national parks for future generations and really upholding the mission of the parks. And that requires everybody to step up and to kind of put that other stuff aside and say, we can't let this happen to these treasures that are so important to all of us.
It's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, one of my guests was a professor who had received a grant to look into the partisanship of environmentalism. I can't wait to see what he comes back with. As you just mentioned, park lovers come in all political flavors, so to speak. Walt Dabney said that on a podcast earlier this year. I mean, whether you're blue or red or purple or whatever, a lot of people love the parks. And one of my upcoming guests is going to talk about how nature is nonpartisan. I hope we can get to that point because there are some who might disagree with that.
Yeah. No, if you think through even things like the Great American Outdoors Act was the largest funding for national parks in 50 years. And that was signed by President Trump in his first term. And I just want to remind people of that I think that, we had equal Republican and Democratic leaders co-sponsoring and working to move that forward. And we're seeing again, interest and looking at that. And what I say to people is if you can come together and protect them with maintenance and all these other things and come together and recognize how important they are, then hear us today when we tell you that in order to maintain and keep these parks protected for the future, they need to be staffing. They need to be staffed, and that has to be a high priority. They need to be able to have the freedom to do their job, to spend money when they need to spend money, and they need to be able to maintain them. And you can't go in and try to micromanage. You can't go in and try to change the historical details of these parks that erase history and do the kinds of things, and then think you're protecting them for the future. So we need to get across that message and make it clear that we know there are leaders out there on both sides of the aisle that love the national parks, but they can't do one thing and then ignore the old, what's happening.
It's interesting. There was an effort earlier this year in Congress to put federal lands on the auction block, and boy, did that generate a lot of opposition from both sides of the aisle, and it was great to see. And I'm kind of curious why we don't see the same thing when the administration proposes to cut a third of the Park Service's budget for the coming fiscal year, and when was it the House Appropriations Committee just recently cut 167 or 170 million dollars. Where's the outrage over that? Because the past recent history shows how underfunded the Park Service is.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you look at the president's bill that came in originally at $1 billion cut, which, literally would have meant closing about 350 of the national park units, would have decimated our national parks if that budget were actually approved. And so what we see happening with the appropriations is, okay, they've said, well, we'll cut 176 million, certainly less, but that's 6% on top of already all of the devastation that has happened with the loss of staffing, with the loss of funds, with the $250 million that they called back from 2025 that was to help build staffing, because park staffing was already, too low. And then if you think about the seasonal workers, they had committed to bringing in 8,000. Well, they've got about 4,500 seasonal workers. That's not 8,000. So between the full-time deficit, of 24%, and then you add the seasonal overlay, the parks are in a crisis situation, and they can't sustain this.
So it's got to be impossible for you to walk into your office and prioritize what NPCA is going to do today. I mean, whether you look at the funding issue, the staffing issue, the maintenance backlog, what new parks should we add to the system? What parks do we need to fight from being jettisoned from the system? My job is easy compared to yours. I mean, all I have to do is write these stories and put them out there, and you have to decide where best to spend your resources to do the best good for the national parks.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And we've had to kind of go through and look at our resources and say what we're not going to do anymore, or at least for now, because we're just not going to make progress. And where do we need to put our resources? And, much of that is in the defense, right? Defending our national parks and really fighting for funding for the parks, fighting for rangers, fighting for the history to be preserved. I mean, all of the deletions that are happening out there and, websites and signage and all these issues around that, making sure that we're focused and really paying attention to that. So that, the hope is someday we can rebuild where we need to rebuild, but also that we can make the public aware of what's happening. And we've had to put tremendous resources into communicating through social media and through other venues to the public, because with so much happening in so many areas, whether it's, EPA and environment, or whether it's healthcare, all the different things that are happening out there, it's this, really what we're seeing is a very serious approach that's having success, because, when you're trying to stop so many things, and we're seeing that in the conservation world, when you have so many things that are threatened, you can't accomplish anything, right? What do you protect yet? Because you're trying to protect it all. So we've really had to narrow in and say the park staffing has really got to be right up there, top issue, because without staffing, you don't run the parks, you don't keep the parks open. And then looking at all the other elements and taking them on, and looking at what legal options we have, as well as options to work with partners around the country to get others to take on some of this leadership.
Yeah, it's really stunning what's going on. Have you heard anything about what the Senate might be thinking in terms of dollars for fiscal 26 for the National Park Service?
I can't give you anything right now for certain. We are hopeful that we might be able to do better in the Senate. We think they certainly understand the situation and the severity of it. So we will be, continuing to work very closely with the Senate. But it was disappointing to see so many lockstep, with the administration in continuing cuts for the Park Service. So it's a difficult, frightening time. I encourage all your listeners to keep calling, keep writing letters, keep pushing, keep standing up, because it does make a difference. The more pressure, and make sure they know that it's not going to be forgotten.
It really amazed me. I'm in Utah, home of the Mighty Five: Arches, Bryce Canyon, Capitol Reef, Canyonlands, and Zion, along with a number of national monuments. The state of Utah has put so much money into that Mighty Five campaign. It's been an incredible success. And yet the congressional delegation is going along with cutting the parks. I don't understand that.
Yeah. And I mean, so if you think about this, the response then is, so are the states going to be able to fund the parks? I mean, have they thought through what this means for places like Moab or communities and gateway communities around these parks, and what it means for the state of Utah and other states as the economic value, as you know, every dollar that is invested in national parks, it returns $15 to the local economy and to the state economy. How are they going to deal with that?
Yeah. There was a measure introduced into the Utah legislature earlier this year to somehow have the state partner with the Park Service to manage the parks, to run the parks, and I don't think it went anywhere because it cost a little bit of money to manage these parks and manage all the visitation. NPCA came out back in spring. You were able to get some information on the cuts to the Alaska Regional Office of the Park Service, and roughly a third of the staff there was let go. And we're not talking newcomers. We're talking important personnel. The superintendent or the regional director retired in March rather than go through what was coming down the pike. The chief ranger retired. A lot of top scientists retired. It's an incredible hit, and it's going to be see how that all plays out. Has your staff been able to find out what's going on in any of the other regional offices around the country?
Yes, we have been able to chat with folks, and we do know what's going on, and it's very scary stuff.
Can you share any details?
I mean, now that they're actually looking at the regional offices as the next kind of real serious hit. And we can tell you, I mean, we've talked to many superintendents and rangers around the country. I mean, it's difficult because I don't want to call anybody out, but I think the refrain that we've heard over and over again is that, basically they've got their, whether it's chief scientist or whoever, cleaning bathrooms or collecting, tickets and, at entrance fees and things like that. That's going on. We know what they're, but they've all said they might be able to patch through and get through this season, but there's no way they can continue for the long term. And then the other thing is there's so many research projects and things that have been underway that are going to be lost. And how much of that data can be useful in the future and saved, and what will be lost for all of us for the future is very significant. So it's all like they're kind of like hanging by a thread, but it's not sustainable, and that they will lose more people. That and there, of course, as you know, the RIF is still ongoing, and they are threatening, we've heard, to go up to 30% reduction. So, that would be just completely devastating.
Yeah, we had a story earlier this summer on the inventory and monitoring program that does so much of that valuable research that tracks the pulse of the national parks, the wildlife, the natural resources, climate change impacts. Whether you believe in climate change or not, there are impacts going on out there that it's really important to monitor what's going on, invasive species and all that. And that program supposedly is being targeted, and it's got to be an incredible brain drain.
Absolutely. The experience that the Park Service has lost and is continuing to lose is really significant. And they're not able to replace. Of course, there's still the hiring freeze. So can you imagine having, over 100 vacancies in superintendents and not having that leadership, and you can't replace them? And they need permission to purchase anything. And these are like small cities, right? They're small towns. And it's just incredible. They can't function. And, it continues on.
Yeah. Let's try and get more positive.
Yes.
Over the past 10 years of your tenure as the CEO and president of NPCA, does any one topic stand out to you, and we'll just forget about the past 6 months?
Oh gosh, so many things. I think two areas that I really feel so proud and have focused a lot of energy on is our efforts around diversity and inclusion, ironically, and really making sure that from a staffing and a board perspective that we really are listening and hearing and have that diversity around the table. And it's made a huge difference in our culture and the organization and how we approach issues. We've been able to be a leader on many of the establishments of our parks over the years, places like Pullman, Belmont Paul, Women's Equality, things like Emmett Till, maybe Till Mobley more recently, and Birmingham, and many tribal sites as well that have been established. And so that work has really been important as we talk about parks are for everyone, and parks stories need to be, fully included within the national park system. Everybody's stories, not just a segment of the population. So that's been a really important piece of the work that NPCA has done over the years, that I'm most proud of. And then our efforts with young people. We created something called the Next Generation Advisory Council, which was about a decade ago when I first became CEO. And initially, it was, bringing young people to help us and to think through everything from how we communicated and how we connected with young people and how we would make sure that they understood the importance and relevance of parks, but also learn from them, like, how do they approach these issues and what are they thinking? And so that process began, with this small idea, and it grew into a much bigger. And now we have youth councils around the country. There are several board members that came up through our Next Gen that are now on our national board. We have hired some of the Next Gen Advisory Council members, so they're on our staff. And some of them are leading and be involved in the youth councils that have been developed around the country. And so the power of that, it's changed. It's changed how we communicate. It's changed our thinking and direction and how we reach that generation that is with us, the Gen Zs and so many others. And it's helped me in my thinking as I think, about the future and where we need to go. So, I think they're positive because now, you can see it, and even the comments and the outrage that's happening around the country. Young people recognize that these national parks are very important to this country, important to them, and to, that they have a role to play in protecting them. And so that's been exciting to be involved with, to watch it expand and, hope for the future.
Yeah, that's all we can do some days. Do you interact much with the friends groups?
We do, and I used to much more individually when I had my role over the years as the regional vice president and traveling all over the country and spending time and speaking with friends groups. I do speak with and communicate with some of the leaders of some of the larger groups that are working out there, and we have a very close relationship with Friends of Acadia and Golden Gate, and, Canyon Land Trust, and Grand Canyon Trust, and several others around the country. And I know our staff, people like Emily Dowse and and others, communicate regularly.
What sense do you have of how they're dealing with all this? I know there's concern out there. Are we funding woke programs or woke interpretive things or whatever's PC, and we better stop that or we're going to lose funding or whatnot? But, Carolyn Ward at the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation, has told me time and time again that, once upon a time the friends groups were providing the margin of excellence. And now, forget about the frosting on top of the cake. They're providing all the ingredients for the cake. Is there concern that the way things are going now that more and more is going to be, I won't say demanded, but hope that the friends groups can provide for the parks?
Well, absolutely. And in some parks, the friends groups are able to raise really significant amounts of funding, and it's just the park that they, the group represents. Some of the parks that aren't as well known, or in regions and places where the resources are not as easily brought in, are going to have a much harder time. And so you're going to see even larger disparities within parks that maybe have a little more because they have a friends group that can raise more resources. Mm-hmm. But the extras, as you said, they're not doing the extras. They're doing the actual funding for core needs because park rangers don't have the resources or don't have the ability to access them, even though they were appropriated, which is a whole other issue. So I think that, as we think about the role of friends groups, I've heard and from many that, they're afraid because they don't want to do anything that's going to cause even more attention and more retribution to their parks. And so they have to be very careful, just like you're saying, the Park Service staff. And so it almost becomes where you have fewer people are willing to step up and be a voice, and stand up against some of these changes. And that's dangerous. That's very dangerous, because if we all stand together and can speak up, but I understand it, and I can, understand the fear. And we also have many of these groups, friends groups, as well as other nonprofits that do get grants and some federal funding, which clearly the administration has shown that they're willing to target and to eliminate that funding. So it's a really tough time for advocates.
It really is. And I'll take 30 seconds to make a public service announcement to any of those lesser known friends groups who are vitally important to their parks, to contact us, and we'll do what we can to promote their activities and encourage our readers and listeners to help support those, because they need the help. They really do. I mean, it's interesting. Friends of Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, it stands out in my mind. It's probably been 15 years since I heard this, but they ran a fundraiser so they could buy toilet paper for the restrooms in the lakeshore. It shouldn't come down to that, but yeah, if there's any friends groups out there that feel that they haven't gotten the attention they deserve, please contact us, and we'll see that you get some of that. There is a concern out there of Secretary Burgum saying that, and the president saying that there are some parks that aren't worthy of Park Service status. Are you got any concerns? Do you have any concerns that they might try and decommission some of the parks? Although I don't think they can do that without congressional approval.
Yes, absolutely. I think, there are those that, I think it was Secretary Burgum who referred to our national parks, some of them as, cost centers, right? And yeah, looking at them as if they're a business, and how much have they made us? How much have they brought in? And instead of really understanding, and so, then you start to go through these parks and you start to think about, so which park is a cost center? Which park is one that is not valuable? Because as you know, in order to become a national park, it's a very rigorous process, and it takes years and years to be able to get to that point where you could be part of the national park system. So, could we argue that there may be a couple out there that maybe don't quite rise to that level? Yeah, but you know what? The reality is that's not, and all of these parks have friends groups and people that love them, and leaders, congressional members that recognize the important role that those parks play in the communities, in their states, and as part of the system. So I think it's difficult to peel away and to do what they're saying. But if you just, stop funding them, you stop providing the resources for staffing and things, do they kind of die on the vine? And then people kind of stop going to them because they don't have the services, or the facilities are not kept up. And you can see that kind of thing playing out if the alarms don't go off and people don't realize that, no, they need to absolutely support these places, or they could go in another way, slowly, painfully, but still go away.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising that the secretary has been that way in light of when he was governor of North Dakota, how much support he gave for keeping horses at Theodore Roosevelt National Park. It kind of gave a glimmer of hope to a lot of conservation and environmental groups that he was going to be kind to public lands and the national parks. And I know REI eventually apologized for supporting his nomination. I've visited a lot of those cost centers. I've been to Knife River Indian Village's National Historic Site. I've been to Fort Larned. I've been to Scotts Bluff. I've been to Fort Laramie. I could go on and on and on, and you could probably trump me. But every time I enter one of those places, it's something magical. I've never gone to one and said, boy, this is a real waste of my time.
Right. Why did I bother doing this? Exactly. The stories are amazing. And that's, one of the things I've said is, where do we learn about our history? Where do we learn about, right, these amazing, it's our national park system. Yeah. And people travel all over the country to see these sites and to go to these places and to share it with their children and their grandchildren. I've done that with mine. I know, I'm sure, you've done the same thing with your family, and you, because you're so like blown away. And that's why I think that people just that don't understand. And I have to say that I think Secretary Burgum did not understand the extent of the national park system. And I think that some people think that, okay, our 63 big national parks, that's kind of it. That's, where, and these other sites, these other little places, like we don't really need to, who cares about Jamestown, right? Or
Well, it's going underwater, so you don't have to worry about that
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, you don't have to worry about it. but other little Revolutionary War history or Civil War history or some of those other sites or places like Manzanar, or, we don't really, they're not that important. Guess what? They're all really important, and they're all part of the fabric of this country. And so, and the other thing is that kind of blows me away is the Park Service budget is so small in the scheme of things. It's one
Well,
tenth of 1% of the whole budget. I mean, come on, it's not even a rounding error. So what are you doing?
yeah, I don't know. And, cost centers in Revolutionary War, I think next year we're supposed to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. And there are so many parks that preserve and protect and interpret Revolutionary War moments in history that are probably all cost centers, but they're all fascinating places that, Morristown in New Jersey, you can go and see where George Washington and Martha Washington spent a cold winter. You walk through that building and see where he worked and planned, and I could go on and on. It's just, such rich, vibrant history. And if the Park Service can't preserve that and protect that and interpret that, who will?
That's right. There's nobody out there that can do that. And that's why the National Park Service, as you know, it's really quite an amazing group of scientists and historians and researchers and biologists and the whole gamut, right? And those that are taking care of public safety and our patrol and do all of the kinds of things. And it takes engineers. I mean, and they've been able to pool and bring these people together and help protect this system for 108 years, 9 years. I mean, it's incredible. And here we are worried about the future of the
Yeah.
service and the system. Who would have imagined, right, that we would have been in a place like that?
It's incredible. So, what are you going to do for the next 5 months before you step down? You got any major projects you have to worry about?
Just a few. I mean, I'll be spending my last breath as CEO, just making sure that our organization is in a strong stead, and making sure that I get out and reach out and do as much as I can to make sure that people understand the importance of this time and how important their role is, and the role that volunteers play and our members play. NPCA has been around for almost as long as the Park Service, right? We were created in 1919, just 3 years after. And it was our founders and Robert Sterling Yard who said it's the people who must protect their own park, who must save their own parks. And it's as true today as it ever was.
Well, to that point, we saw some protests around the parks back in the spring.
Yes.
I haven't heard too much since then. Any rallying causes for a national parks day once a month or whatnot?
Yes, yes. We are looking at August 25th, building up to a day of action, but there will be many days of actions leading up to that. So, that will be, one grand rallying point, but we're continuing throughout communities and working around the country to set up opportunities for people to come together to voice their concerns, attend town hall meetings, to really make sure that their voices are heard, and looking at ways that we can ramp that up, and particularly in key and important congressional districts where we really need those members to stand up and to support our parks. So, yeah, a lot of work's going to be happening over this next month with the recess.
Summer recess, that's right.
Yes.
Well, we'll see how successful you are. I know there are a lot of strange things going on in Congress these days, and you can never predict the future.
And, I don't want to leave people with this feeling as there is no hope, because I do think with each thing, if you think about, there were initially like 35 leases that they were going to eliminate. Some of them were visitor centers,
right.
A gamut, right, of different. They finally got down to 5, and I think then of those 5, there were 2 that were not necessary and that were already looking at closed, whatever. So, basically, with each of these issues, we've been able to, stop the very worst from happening, and also have seen them kind of back down. And that's where I do believe that as people continue to speak up, continue to rally, that we'll see some of this turn around, and hopefully by next year, start to feel like we can start to move forward and make some headway and some progress. Because if they really want to have a celebration of America 250, you've got to be able to celebrate and point to and look at our national park system, right, as the centerpiece. And so they want to be in a position to be able to do that. They need to start now.
Yeah, and one of the key things that was introduced in the spring, a bipartisan proposal, I believe, to basically extend the Great American Outdoors Act by a different name. And I'm sure your Hill staff is working hard on getting co-sponsors for that. Any idea how that's coming along?
Well, actually, we've been able to get Republican co-sponsors as well as Democratic co-sponsors. We are hopeful because I think there is momentum. They want to do something, certainly for America 250, and this would be something important that they could do. But we've also been prefacing that with, the staffing, that you've got to have the staffing in place, and you have to make sure that you recognize the importance of all of our national parks and the history that and the important role they play in our country. And so we are hopeful that might be a real positive that we can get for the national parks system, and we're continuing to push that.
Well, hopefully it'll be successful because, the Great American Outdoors Act has funded so many worthy projects across the park system.
Yes. Every state and almost every district has seen, across the country, some benefits from it. Yeah. So it really has been, I think, implemented well. But that's the other point. If we have a Great American Outdoors Act too, we need to have people in place to be able to implement it and to be able to make it happen. So
I heard that was part of the problem with reductions. Well, Theresa, thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks so much for all the effort you've put into NPCA over your career there. It's been phenomenal to watch the growth, and it'll be sad to see you leave, but as you say, you're always going to be a park advocate, and you'll be out there somewhere doing something.
Absolutely, Kirk. Thank you so much for everything you do, and I really appreciate you having me and all the support and all the recognition you've given to national parks and to NPCA. We really appreciate it.
That's our show for this week. We hope you found it interesting. Next week, Lynn Riddick returns with an episode from El Camino Rio de los Tejas, a network of trails that connected Spanish missions, settlements, and military outposts from Mexico through Texas and into Louisiana. Today, that trail is a National Historic Trail. I'm sure you'll find her story fascinating. For The Traveler, this is Kurt Repenchek. See you in the parks.
The composers and musicians at Orange Tree Productions have created a unique collection known as the National Park Series that has grown to include more than 30 CD titles. Composed against the backdrop of a park's sounds of nature, these musical scores will connect you with these beautiful places and take you there, at least in your mind. This collection is the #1 selling National Park audio series in the world and provides the background music for National Parks Travelers podcasts. Visit them at orangetreeproductions.com. Editing and production work for the National Parks Traveler podcast is done by Splitbeard Productions. You can learn more about us at splitbeardproductions.com. National Parks Traveler is a 501c3 nonprofit media organization that provides daily editorial coverage of national parks and protected areas. Traveler's coverage is made possible by reader and listener donations. Visit us at nationalparkstraveler.org.